They told me the horse would have to be shot on Michaelmas, and I said nothing, because a man who has not spoken above a murmur in 11 months does not suddenly find his voice to save the animal that ruined him. I heard it from the gallery above the stable yard, where I had taken a standing in the gray hours when the grooms thought me still abed. Halloran, my steward, was below with the head groom, Pike, and their words carried up cold and plain on the autumn air. The gray had struck out again, split a stall board clean through, taken a piece from a lad's forearm. He could not be broke, could not be sold, could not even be turned out to grass without 3 men and a deal of rope. There was nothing for it. On Michaelmas, Pike would fetch the gun. I stood with my gloved hand on the rail and looked down at the roof of his stall, the far one, bolted and barred like a jail, and I felt nothing I could name. The gray had thrown me at the water jump at Ravensholt 18 months before, in front of half the county, thrown me and rolled on me and left me with a leg that would not bear my weight past a quarter hour, and a face I no longer let any living soul look upon. And still, standing there, I could not summon the hatred that would have made his death a satisfaction. He had done to my body only what the fall had done to the rest of me. We were, the gray and I, 2 ruined creatures kept in the dark at opposite ends of the same house, and the difference between us was only that no one had yet decided the man was past mending. I want you to understand what I had been before, so that you understand what I became, and what she made of me after. I was Adrian Woad, 5th Duke of Ashfell, and men called me the Duke who never fell. It was not flattery. It was fact, or near enough to pass for it. From the time I could sit a saddle I had never been beaten across country, never been unseated at a fence, never once come off in a field of 40 riders where lesser men broke collarbones like kindling. I hunted 3 counties and won everything I entered. I rode green horses no one else would mount, and made them into hunters worth a year's rents. There was a coldness in it, an exactness. I did not love the animals particularly. I loved the winning, the being unbeaten, the moment at the top of a hedge when the whole county watched and I did not so much as shift in the plate. My father had been a hard man and a hard rider, and he had raised me to believe that a Woad did not fail, did not falter, did not show the world a single crack. I believed him. God help me, I built my whole life upon it. I remember him best on horseback, my father, because that was the only place he ever looked at me with anything I could mistake for warmth. Off a horse I was a disappointment, too quiet, too fond of books, a boy who flinched. On a horse I was his son, so I learned to be his son. I learned to swallow the flinch, to sit the rearing colt with my face like stone, to go at the fence that frightened me precisely because it frightened me, and to let no man living guess that Adrian Woad was ever afraid of anything at all. By the time I was 20 the mask had grown into the face. I did not know any longer where the pretense stopped. I thought I was the thing I performed. I thought the coldness went all the way down. And then, at a jump I had cleared 100 times on a horse I had brought on myself, something turned over, a stumble, a slip of the takeoff ground, a shadow the gray shied at, and I went down under half a ton of falling horse into the black water, and when they pulled me out I was not the Duke who never fell any longer. I was a thing. The surgeons kept the leg, which they were pleased to call a triumph. It set crooked and it aches in the wet, and I walk with a stick now like a man of 70, though I was but 32. And the face, I will not dwell on the face. A shod hoof had opened me from brow to jaw down the left side, and the flesh healing had drawn tight and wrong, and the eye above it wept and would not fully close. I was told by my aunt, who is honest to the point of cruelty, that I was not fit to be seen. I decided she was right. I dismissed the guests, the friends, the whole glittering machinery of a duke's life. I drew the curtains at Ashfell and I did not open them again. What I have not told you, what I told no one in those months, is the true shape of what the fall took from me. It was not the leg, nor even the face. It was that when the mask cracked, I found there was nothing underneath it. I had spent 30 years being unbreakable, and the instant I broke I understood that unbreakable was all I had ever been. There was no man beneath the Duke who never fell, Only the frightened boy who had learned so well to hide his fear that he had hidden it even from himself. And now the hiding place was gone, and the fear was everywhere, in the dark, in the wet ache of the leg and the weeping eye, in the certainty that I would live out my days as a monster in a shuttered house, because a monster was, at last, the only true thing I had ever been. That was why I would not be seen. Not vanity. I could have borne to be pitied for a scar. What I could not bear was to be seen and found empty. 11 months I had lived so, when I stood in the gallery and heard them say the grey would die at Michaelmas. I remember thinking, with a kind of grey satisfaction, that it was fitting. Ashfell would be a house of the dead by spring, and I turned to limp back to my dark rooms, and it was then that Halloran said the last thing, the thing that changed everything, though neither of us knew it. "There's a girl," he said, "down Fenwick Way. Pike swears by her. Says she's gentled horses no man could get a hand on, a coaching mare that killed a fellow, a stud stallion turned man-hater. Says if any soul alive can quiet the grey, it's her." Pike spat. "She's a groom's daughter, Mr. Halloran, old Josiah Hale's girl. It's not a thing you'd do, send for a lass to handle a killer. His Grace would never." "His Grace," said Halloran, "does not speak of the horses at all, and the beast is to be shot regardless. What's the harm in it if she'll come? Better a girl gentles him and we sell him on than we waste good powder." I should have gone back to my rooms. I meant to. Instead I stood at the rail in the cold, and I heard myself say, in a voice rusty from disuse, loud enough to reach the yard below, "Send for her." The silence that followed was the silence of two men who had forgotten the master of the house had a tongue at all. Then Halloran, recovering, called up, "Your Grace." "Send for the Hale girl," I said. "If she'll come, she may try the grey. Michaelmas can wait a fortnight." I did not stay to see their faces. I had surprised myself more than I had surprised them. I told myself, going back through the shuttered corridors, that it was nothing, that I had spoken only from some last dry ember of the horseman I had been, unwilling to see even that killer put down without a fair chance. I did not let myself think that I had wanted, for one moment in 11 months, to alter the course of a single thing. That I had wanted, God help me, something to happen. She came on the 3rd day, in the last of the light, in a cart that Pike drove up from the village. I watched from the shuttered window of my study, through the crack I allowed myself, and I saw her get down, a slight figure in a plain grey stuff gown and a shawl the color of the moors, with a battered leather bag, and no maid, no attendant, nothing but herself. She stood in the yard and looked about her, not at the great house, not up at the windows where a lesser woman would have gaped, but at the stables, at the roofline, at the way the yard lay, reading the place, I understood later, the way she read everything, taking its measure. And then she walked without hurry, without being led, straight to the far stall, the bolted one, and she laid her hand flat against the barred door, and she stood there a long time with her ear near the wood, listening to whatever was inside. Pike hurried after her, gesturing, plainly warning her back. She answered him without turning her head. I could not hear the words, but I saw Pike stop and take off his hat and step away, and I knew she had said something that a head groom of 30 years' standing did not think to argue with. I did not go down. Of course I did not go down, but I did not close the shutter either. I stood in the dark of my study, and I watched the girl in the grey gown until the light was quite gone and Pike led her off to the servants' quarters, and I found that my heart, which I had thought as ruined and quiet as the rest of me, was beating. She did not go into the stall the first day, nor the second. I know this because I watched from the gallery in the mornings, from the study window in the afternoons, hidden, a spy in my own house. It galled me, and I did it anyway. What she did those first days was simply be near him. She had them move a stool to the passage outside his stall, and she sat there with the top door open and the bottom barred, and she did nothing at all that I could see, sat with her mending, or with a bit of bread and cheese, and talked, low and steady, a sound too soft to carry words up to me, only the music of it on and on, patient as rain. The grey screamed and struck the walls, and she did not so much as look up. She let him rage. She sat in the storm of him and mended a stocking and talked, and when he tired and went quiet at last, still she did not move to him. She only stayed so that the quiet had her in it, so that his ease and her presence became, by slow degrees, the same thing. On the morning of the second day I sent Halloran down to ask what she required, for I would not go myself. He came back looking as though he had been set a riddle. "She requires nothing, your grace," he said. "I asked did she want more men or ropes or a hobble for the beast. She said no. I asked how long she would need. She said as long as it took and no less, and that if I wanted it done faster I might do it myself." A pause. "She is very plain-spoken, your grace." "For a groom's daughter." "Is she insolent?" Halloran considered this with the care of a man who did not wish to misrepresent the matter. "No, your grace," he said at last. "I do not think she is insolent. I think she simply does not see the use in saying a thing that is not true. It comes to the same in a drawing room, but it is not the same." I dismissed him, but I turned that over a long while, standing at my window. She does not see the use in saying a thing that is not true. For it was the first sentence in 11 months that had made me wish to meet the person it described. On the fourth day she went in. I nearly called out. I was at the gallery rail and I saw her unbar the lower door and slip inside with the gray loose and unbroken. No rope, no whip, nothing in her hands, and every muscle in me went rigid with the certainty that I was about to watch a girl killed in my own stable, and be unable to move fast enough on my ruined leg to do one cursed thing about it. Pike was in the yard and he had gone white. The gray wheeled to face her, huge and furious, ears flat, and I saw the great muscles bunch along his quarters. And Rowena Hale turned her back on him. She turned her back deliberately, calmly, and looked at the wall, at nothing, at her own folded hands, and she waited. To turn your back on a killing horse is either the act of a fool or the act of someone who understands a truth about fear that the rest of us spend our lives running from, that a creature braced for a fight cannot fight a thing that will not face it. The gray stood with all his fury cocked and nothing to loose it against. And slowly, I watched it, I have never forgotten it, the ears came up, the head lowered. And after a long while the gray took one step, and then another, and put his muzzle to the back of that gray shawl and breathed her in. Only then did she turn, slow as the turning of the year. And she laid her hand, the first hand to touch him in kindness in longer than I knew, flat on his neck, and she was still talking, still that low music, and the killer of a horse stood under her palm and let her. I found that I was gripping the rail so hard the old wood groaned, and that my face was wet, and I did not know when either of those things had begun. I went down. I had not gone down to the yard in daylight in 11 months. I went now, slow and lurching on my stick, down the back stair and through the harness room, and I stopped in the shadow of the doorway where the passage met the yard, close enough to see, not so close as to be seen. And I stood there, a duke skulking in a doorway of his own stable, and I watched her work. She did not know I was there, or so I believed. She stayed with the gray until the light began to go, and when she finally slipped out and barred the door, she stood a moment with her forehead against the wood, spent, and I saw that the calm she wore was not the absence of fear but the mastery of it, that she had been as afraid as any of us, and had simply refused to let the horse pay for her fear. And that, I think, was the moment, not the turning of her back, not the hand on his neck. It was that, the sight of a slight girl leaning tired against a stable door, having been brave not because she felt no fear but in the teeth of it, that undid something in me I had thought past undoing. She turned to go and she saw me. I did not have time to withdraw. I stood in the failing light with the whole ruin of my face turned toward her, I who had not let a servant look full at me in nearly a year, and I waited for what they all did. The flinch, the quick drop of the eyes, the pity which is worse than the flinch. My aunt's word, not fit to be seen. Rowena Hale looked at me. She looked at me the way she had looked at the yard the first evening, steadily, taking my measure, reading me, and she did not flinch. And she did not drop her eyes, and there was no pity in her face at all, only a kind of grave, level attention, as though I were a thing she meant to understand rather than a thing she meant to endure. And then she said, in a voice I heard clearly for the first time, low and unhurried, with the broad soft vowels of the Moors in it, "He's not a killer, your grace, he's frightened. There's a difference, though I grant you it looks the same from the outside." I did not know what to say. I had not held a conversation with a living soul in longer than I could rightly recall. At last I said in my rusty voice the only thing that was true, "He nearly killed me. He did kill the man I was." She considered that. She did not offer comfort. I have thought since that if she had offered comfort I might have gone back inside and shut the door and we should none of us have this story. But she only said, "Aye, he's frightened of you and all. He remembers the fall the same as you do. Two of you carrying the same day about either end of the house." She shouldered her bag. "Beg pardon, your grace, I speak plain. My father says it'll be the ruin of me." "No," I said, too quickly. "No, speak plain. I find I have had my fill of the other thing." She looked at me a moment longer. Then she dipped a curtsy, brief and unservice, and walked away across the darkening yard. And I stood in the doorway holding my stick and my ruined face and the strange, unfamiliar, painful thing that had begun in my chest and would not leave off, which was, I understand now, hope, and which at the time I could only have described as a kind of ache. After that, I did not hide from her. I will not pretend it was easy, or that it came all at once. It came the way she brought the gray on by inches, over weeks, with much standing near and saying little. But each morning I came down to the yard, openly now, on my stick, and I stood at the rail while Rowena Hale worked the gray, and at first we did not speak at all, and then we spoke of the horse, and then, by slow degrees, we spoke of other things. The first mornings we spoke only of him. She would tell me what she was doing and why, not to instruct me, I think, but because she talked to the horse in the same low current whether I was there or not, and I had merely joined the things she talked near. "He's not stubborn," she said, the fifth or sixth morning, working a brush along the gray's shoulder while he stood with one hind foot cocked. "Folk always say a bad horse is stubborn or wicked or wants a firmer hand. There's no wickedness in a horse. There's only fear and pain and confusion and a memory longer than you'd credit. This one was hurt and frightened at once, the day of your fall, and no one came near him after but with ropes and shouting, so he learned that men mean the rope and the shout. He's not fighting you. He's fighting the day he can't stop living in. And how do you unteach a horse the worst day of his life?" She looked at me across his back, a look I came to know, level and unhurried and somehow without the smallest particle of deference in it, though she was never once uncivil. "You don't unteach it," she said. "You can't take a day off a creature. You give him enough better days near enough together that the bad one stops being the whole of what he knows. That's all. There's no trick in it. Only time and staying and not flinching when he flinches. Only time and staying and not flinching when he flinches." I have thought since that she told me, that fifth morning, exactly how she meant to mend me, and that I was too much a fool to know I was the second horse in the yard. She was, I learned by degrees, 24, the daughter of Josiah Hale, who had been head groom to a baronet down the dale until his knees gave out, and she had grown up in a stable the way other girls grow up in a nursery. Her mother was dead these 10 years. She had gentled her first spoiled horse at 11, a pony that bit, and had a name in 3 parishes by the time she was 20 for taking the horses no one else could. She read This surprised me, and I let it show, and she gave me a look that made me ashamed of the surprise. The baronet's library had been open to the servants who cared for books, and she had cared, and she had used it. She quoted Cowper at me once dryly over a fractious colt. I was a stricken deer that left the herd, and I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed since the water closed over my head at Ravensholt, and the sound of it startled us both. The gray threw up his head at it, and she soothed him, but she was smiling, the first I had seen her smile, and I would have gone through the fall again to be the cause of it. The weeks drew on and the mornings grew colder, and I found I could not stay away. I told myself it was the horse. I would come down after breakfast and stand at the rail an hour, then two, and the hour I did not spend in the yard I spent in ill temper, watching the clock, waiting for the next morning. Halloran remarked cautiously that your grace seemed in better health. My valet, who had dressed me in silence for 11 months, ventured to lay out a coat of color rather than the perpetual black, and I let him, and did not know why until I caught myself at the glass, wondering what she would think of it, and then stood a long while, ashamed and amazed, understanding at last what had happened to me. Because I had begun to love her. There is no gentler way to set it down. I, who had thought that particular door in me not merely closed but bricked up and forgotten, had fallen in love with a groom's daughter in a gray gown, and I knew it, and I fought it, and I lost. And with the loving came the confessions, though I did not plan them. She asked nothing, that was the whole of it. Everyone else in my life had wanted something of me. My aunt wanted my duty, Halloran my decisions, the county my presence, my father, long dead, had wanted my hardness. Rowena Hale wanted nothing at all. She came to gentle a horse and be paid and go home. And because she wanted nothing, I found, to my astonishment, that I could give everything. I told her of my father, one gray afternoon when the rain kept us under the eaves of the tack room, and the gray dozed in his stall. I told her what it had been to be raised to be unbreakable, to be a son only on horseback, to learn so young to swallow the flinch that I had forgotten I owned one. I told her, and this I had never told a living soul, the true thing about the fall. Not the leg, not the face, but that when the mask cracked I had found nothing underneath it, that I believed myself to be at the bottom empty. A performance with no man inside it, a duke made all of surface and fear. She heard it out, mending in her lap, and when I had done she did not rush to contradict me, which I think is why I believed her when at last she spoke. That's a deal of years spent being what you're not, she said. No wonder you're tired. And then, after a silence, in her plain way, but you've got it backward, your grace, if you'll forgive me. You say there's nothing under the mask. I've sat in this yard 6 weeks, and I'll tell you what I've watched. I've watched a man come down to a cold stable every morning on a leg that pains him, to stand and see to a horse that ruined him, because he couldn't bear to see even that beast put down unfairly. That's not nothing. That's not a man made of surface. A man made of surface would have had the horse shot and gone back to bed. The mask was the hard thing, your grace. What's under it is soft, and you've been that ashamed of the soft thing all your life you called it empty so's you'd not have to feel it. But it's there. I've seen it, it's the best of you. She bent again to her mending. It's why the horse'll come to you before he'll come to Pike, and Pike's forgotten more of horses than I'll ever know. He knows soft when he smells it. So do I. I could not answer her. I got up and went out into the rain and stood in it a while, and when I came back my face was wet, and I let her think it was the weather, and she let me, which was its own kind of kindness. The gray came on. By November he wore a head collar and led at a walk and stood to be groomed and had his feet handled, and Rowena had him on a long line in the paddock, moving in easy circles, the fury gone out of him and something almost like play come into its place. Pike, who had known horses 50 years, watched with his hat in his hands and said more than once that he had never in his life seen the like of it, that the girl was uncanny, that it was near to witchcraft, and then, seeing my face, added that he meant it for the highest praise a man could give. Halloran ceased to speak of Michaelmas. No one spoke of the gun. The far stall stood open now in the daytime, unbarred, and the gray put his head over the door and watched the yard like any honest horse, and the lads who had feared him fed him windfall apples from the flat of the hand. My aunt came in the 3rd week of November, as she came every month, to inspect me and to remind me of my duties. Lady Farrand is my father's sister, and much like him, upright, unsparing, wholly without the vice of tact, and she loves me, I do believe, though she has never once said a warm word to me in her life, and would think herself insulted to be accused of it. She came in her black carriage and her black bonnet, and she looked at me across the long table with her sharp, pale, appraising eyes, and I saw her mark the coat of color, and the open shutters, and something in my face she could not name. "You are altered," she said. It was an accusation. "The horse is mending, aunt." "I care nothing for the horse." She set down her cup. "Adrian, it is 14 months. You cannot sit in the dark at Ashfell until you die and let the title go sideways to your cousin Crail, who is a fool and a spendthrift and would have the estate mortgaged to the rafters inside 3 years, and your father's grandsons, if you would trouble to get any begging their bread. You have a name. You have a seat in the Lords you have not once taken. You have a duty to marry and get an heir, and every month you sulk here is a month nearer to Crail, and I will not, and here, for the first and only time in my memory, her voice was not quite steady. I will not watch this house go to that man because you have decided a scar on your face excuses you from being a woad." It was as near to feeling as I had ever seen her come, and it silenced me. She recovered herself at once and was iron again. "There is to be a ball," she said, "at the Aldenshaws at the New Year, the whole county. You will come. You have hidden long enough. Let them look at you and be done with it, and then let us find you a wife with a good name and a good fortune and get this business settled before Crail settles it for us." I said I would think on it. I meant to refuse, and I would have refused and gone back into the dark but for what happened between that gray November afternoon and the New Year, and the whole of it turned, as everything at Ashfell turned that winter, upon the girl in the gray gown and upon the horse. There was, in the long gallery at Ashfell, a floor of old oak that my mother had loved to dance upon, in the days when the house was full of light. I had not been in that room in years. But there came an evening in early December. I had kept Rowena late, for the gray had cast a shoe and we had waited on the farrier, and the cart could not go until it was mended, when I found her, having eaten in the servants' hall, standing in the doorway of that long gallery in the last of the candlelight, looking in at the emptiness of it, the shrouded furniture, the great cold hearth, the floor my mother had danced upon. "It's a grand room," she said, not turning, hearing my stick. "Grand and sad, rooms know when they've been shut up, same as horses, same as folk. It was my mother's favorite. There were balls here when I was a boy. I used to watch from that gallery. I nodded up at it in my nightshirt when I ought to have been abed." "And now you watch from galleries still," she said, and there was no unkindness in it, only that plain seeing of hers that went through a man like a lamp through paper. "The whole of your life spent up in the gallery, your grace, looking down at the thing you're too feared to go into." I do not know what possessed me. Perhaps it was the candlelight, or the 14 months of silence breaking all at once, or simply that I was so full of her by then that the thing spilled over. I crossed the cold floor to where she stood, slow and lurching on my ruined leg, and I held out my hand, the way, I realize now, the Duke in the old tales holds out his hand to the wallflower, though I did not think of it so. I thought of nothing. I only could not bear for one moment more to be a man who watched from the gallery. "Then come into the room with me," I said. "I cannot dance. The leg will not have it. But stand up with me a moment here in my mother's room, and let there be one thing in it again that is not sad." She looked at my hand, and then she looked at my face, the whole of it, the ruin and the rest, and she put her hand in mine. We did not dance. I could not. We only stood in the middle of that great empty candle-lit floor, her hand in mine and my other hand at the small of her back and hers on my shoulder in the attitude of a dance, and we swayed a little, barely moving, and the leg held for it, and we were silent, and the candle flames leaned in the draught, and it was the nearest thing to happiness I had known in the whole of my life. She was warm. She smelled of hay and of the cold and of some plain soap, and her head came just to my chin, and I felt the whole length of that 14 months of dark begin, at last, to go out of me. "Rowena," I said into her hair. It was the first time I had used her name. She went still, And then she stepped back gently, but she stepped back out of my arms and she looked up at me, and her face was not level now. It was troubled, which frightened me more than any flinch could have done. "Don't, your grace," she said low. "Please, don't say a thing to me you'll be sorry for come morning, and I'll not know how to look at you after. I know what I am and I know what you are. I'm to gentle your horse and take my pay and go home to Fenwick, and if I let myself—" She stopped. She mastered it the way she mastered the fear in the stall, by main force. "You've been alone a long while," she said, more steadily. "A lonely man'll mistake the first warm thing that comes near for something more than it is. It's not a fault in you, it's just the loneliness talking. Let it be the horse, your grace. Let me mend the horse and go, and think kindly of me after, and don't make it a thing that can't end well." And she curtsied and went out, and left me standing in my mother's cold gallery with my hand still half lifted, and I understood that she had done to me exactly what she did to the frightened horse. She had turned her back gently, and given me nothing to fight, and left me with all my longing cocked and no way to loose it, except that this once I did not think she had done it for the horse's sake. I thought I let myself think, for the first time, that she had done it because she was as frightened as I was, and of the same thing, and had the same reasons and more to be. I did not sleep that night. I lay in the dark and I turned it over and I saw the shape of the trap we were both in, she a groom's daughter, I a duke, the world that would not permit it, my aunt who would sooner see the odious Crail inherit, and beneath all of that in each of us the same old terror of being seen and found wanting. And I thought, she is right, it cannot end well. And then I thought, with a violence that surprised me, that I did not care how it ended, that I had spent 30 years caring only for how things looked and where they ended, and it had made me a monster in a dark house, and I would rather have one true thing that ended badly than a lifetime more of the safe and the empty. But I did not know how to say so to her without making it worse. And so I said nothing, and December drew on toward the new year, and the ball, and the day that broke it all open. I told my aunt I would go to the Aldenshaws' ball. I told her, too, for I would not have her ambushed, that I did not intend to look for a wife there, that my mind was fixed on another matter, and that she must trust me a little while longer. She looked at me a long, hard moment, and something in my face must have told her more than my words did, for she said only, in a voice of deep foreboding, "I hope you are not being a fool, Adrian," and let it lie, which for my aunt was a mercy near to weeping. The thing that broke it open was, fittingly, the horse. It was the second week of December, 3 days before the ball, hard frost on the ground, the moor gone iron-colored and the beck silent under ice. Rowena had the gray out on the long line in the top paddock, where the ground rose to the dry stone wall and beyond it the open fell. I stood at the gate, wrapped against the cold, my breath smoking. We had not spoken again of the gallery. We had gone back, both of us, by unspoken treaty to the safe ground of the horse, but it was there between us now, in every silence, the thing neither of us would name, and the air of that frozen morning was full of it. It was very still. I remember the stillness particularly because of what tore it. A gun went off down in the covert, some fool of a poacher, or one of the keepers after a fox, I never learned which, a flat, hard crack that ran across the frozen fell like a whip, and the gray went from ease to terror between one heartbeat and the next. The fall, you understand. The gun was the fall to him, the crack of it, the sudden violence out of a quiet day. He reared and spun, and the long line came alive in Rowena's hands, and I saw her set her heels and hold against half a ton of horse gone back into his nightmare, and I saw the moment her strength was not enough, the moment the line ran and burned through her grip, and she was pulled off her feet and dragged 3 yards across the frozen ground before she let go. She had to let go, or be killed, and the gray went over the low place in the wall in a great desperate leap and was gone. Out onto the open fell, running, mad with the old fear, straight toward the moss and the mires where a running horse in winter breaks a leg or drowns. And I did not think. For the first time in 14 months, I did not think about my leg or my face or the man I no longer was. I saw Rowena on the frozen ground, gasping, her hands torn, and the horse vanishing toward the mires, and I moved. There was a cob in the near paddock, a stolid, quiet beast Pike used for the cart. I was on him bareback with only the head collar and the lead rope before I knew I had decided anything, my ruined leg screaming as it took the horse's barrel, and I heard Rowena cry out behind me, "Adrian, no." The leg, my name, my own name, not your grace, and it went through me like fire, and I did not stop. I put my heels to the cob and sent him at the wall, the dry stone wall, the first fence I had faced in 18 months, and I did not so much as think to be afraid. There was no room in me for it, and the old cob heaved himself over gamely, and we were out on the fell in the gray and freezing air, going after the runaway. I will not make more of the ride than it was. The cob was no hunter, and I was no longer the horseman I had been, and my leg was a white agony inside a quarter-mile. Twice I near came off, but I knew the fell. I had ridden every yard of it as a boy, in the days when I was my father's son on horseback, and I knew where the gray in his blind terror was heading, and I knew a line to cut him off that a man who did not know the ground would never have found. I took the cob down a frozen gill and up the far side and across the top of the moss, the ice cracking under us, and I came out ahead of the gray where the ground narrowed between two mires, and I turned the cob broadside across the gap and stopped, and I did the thing Rowena had taught me without ever once meaning to teach it. I did not chase him. I did not shout or wave or drive him. I sat the cob still in the gap, blocking the way to the mire, and I waited, and I began to talk. Low, steady. On, a sound with no words in it that mattered, only the music of it, the way she did. Easy now, easy, I have you, easy, and the gray, thundering down on us wild-eyed, checked and slowed and stopped, sides heaving, 20 feet away, trembling, trapped between the mires and the still man on the still horse who would not chase him and would not flee. "I know," I said to him, and my voice broke on it. "I know I was there and all. I remember it the same as you." And I got down, my leg buckled the moment it took my weight, and I nearly went down full length and caught myself on the cob's shoulder and stood swaying. And then I walked toward the gray, slow as the turning of the year, one hand out, talking, and I turned my shoulder to him at the last, the way she had, giving him the choice, asking nothing, and I waited. And the gray, the killer, the ruin of me, the horse I had every cause on earth to hate, took one trembling step, and then another, and put his great soft muzzle against my ruined face, against the scarred left side that no living soul had touched in a year, and breathed me in. His breath was warm on the weeping eye. He stood over me, huge and gentle and trembling, and let me, and I stood on the frozen fell with my arm over the neck of the horse that broke me, and I wept, freely, without shame, for the first time in my whole life. Not the silent leaking of the eye that would not close, but weeping, the real thing, the thing my father had beaten out of me before I was 6. And it was not for grief. It was for something I had no word for then and would call now, plainly, deliverance. That was how she found us. She had come after on foot, running, her torn hands pressed to her side, and she stopped at the edge of the moss and stood there, and I looked up over the gray's neck and saw her face, and it was not the calm, level face she wore for frightened horses. It was open, wholly open. And what was in it? I made myself believe it at last, standing there with the horse's breath warm on my ruin, was not the grave kindness of a woman gentling another wounded creature. It was fear for me. It was gladness at the sight of me alive. It was the thing I had told myself a broken man had no right to hope for, and had gone on hoping for anyway. She came across the frozen ground, careless of the ice, and she stopped before me, and she was crying, which I had never seen, and she struck me once on the chest with the flat of her torn hand, not hard, the way you strike a person you have been terrified for, and she said, "You could have been killed. You went over the wall on that leg, you could have and could not finish it." "Rowena," I said, "you turned your back on him in the stall and let him come to you, and you did the same to me in the gallery that night. You turned your back and gave me nothing to fight and told me it was only the loneliness talking. I have thought of nothing else since. And I have come out onto this fell and gone over that wall and gentled the horse that ruined me the way you gentle everything, and I find I am done with turning my back, so I will not. I will face it and say it plain the way you taught me. I love you. Not because I am lonely. Because you are the bravest and truest soul I have ever known, and you looked at the ruin of my face on the fourth day and did not flinch, and no one in the whole of my life has ever once looked at the true of me and not flinched. Tell me it meant nothing to you, and I will never speak of it again. But I do not think you can, and I do not think you will turn your back this time, because I have watched you do it, and I know now that you only do it when you are afraid. She looked up at me, at all of me, the scarred face and the whole face, the ruined man, and whatever it was she had somehow found and drawn out of him into the light, and she did not turn her back this time, and she did not wait for me to come to her. She reached up, this groom's daughter with her torn and bleeding hands, and she laid one flat against the ruined side of my face, the weeping eye, the drawn-tight scar, the part of me my own aunt had said was not fit to be seen, and she held it there, warm against the cold, and she said, "It was never nothing. Not from the third day, when I sat in the storm of that horse and looked up and saw a broken man standing in a doorway who couldn't bear to see even the beast that ruined him treated unfair. I loved you from the doorway, Adrian Woad, and I've been that frightened of it ever since I could scarce breathe. Not because of your face. God love you, your face was never the trouble. Because you're a duke and I'm Josiah Hale's girl, and I'd sooner have kept it hid the whole of my life than let you offer it to me out of gratitude or loneliness or pity, and watch it turn to regret the first cold morning after." "There will be no regret," I said, "and no gratitude and no pity, for there is nothing in this to pity but the fool I was before you came. I have hidden in the dark for a year because I believed there was no man under the mask worth the seeing. You saw him. You are the only soul on this earth who ever did you, and, God help me, this horse. I will not offer you the loneliness. I offer you the man you found. It is not much, a lame man with half a face, but it is at last a true thing, and you made it true, and it is yours if you will have it." The gray stood by us, quiet now, his breath smoking in the iron air, the Myers lying gray and silent to either side. And on the open fell, in the freezing December light, with no witness but a gentled horse and the wide empty moor, I bent my head, my ruined head, and she did not turn away, and I kissed her, her torn hand still warm against my scarred cheek, and the last of the cold thing I had carried since the water closed over me at Ravensholt went out of me altogether and did not come back. I did not go to the Aldenshaw's ball. I went instead to my aunt. I will not pretend the storm was small. I told her plainly in the long gallery where 3 days before I had stood swaying with a groom's daughter in my arms that I meant to marry Rowena Hale, and Lady Farron went first white and then a dangerous shade of red and told me I had lost my wits, that it was the fall, that a Woad did not marry a servant, that the county would never receive her, that I would make myself the byword of 3 shires, that my father would rise from his grave. I heard it all out. And when she had done, when she had run herself at last to a trembling silence, I said the only thing I had prepared, which was the truth. "Aunt, you told me, 14 months ago, that I was not fit to be seen. You were more right than you knew. There was nothing under the mask by then. You had all of you seen to that, you and my father and the whole cold county, who wanted a marvel in a glass case and not a man. I was empty. I would have died in the dark and let Crail have the house, and been glad too. Rowena Hale came and gentled a killing horse, and then, without ever meaning to, she gentled the worse ruin at the other end of the house, and she put a man back inside the mask where there had been nothing for 30 years. She is the reason I am standing in this room and not lying in the dark upstairs. You said you would not watch this house go to Crail. Nor will I, but it will not be saved by a good name and a good fortune and a wife I do not love. It will be saved by her, or not at all, for she is the only thing that ever made me want to live in it." My aunt was silent a very long while. She is not a soft woman, and she did not become one. But she is not a fool either, whatever her faults, and she had seen, I know she had seen the open shutters and the coat of color, and the man who came down to speak to her with a steady voice for the first time since the fall. At last she said, stiffly, looking not at me but at the cold hearth, "Bring her to me. If she is what you say, I will know it in a quarter hour. And if she is not, I will tell you so, and you may hate me for it, but I will tell you." I brought her. And Rowena Hale, who had turned her back on a killing horse and not flinched at a duke's ruined face, walked into my aunt's presence in her plain gray gown with her healing hands folded before her, and did not flinch there either. She did not curtsy too low, nor speak too much, nor pretend to be a thing she was not. She met Lady Farron's terrible pale eyes with her own level ones, and answered every sharp question plainly and truthfully. And when my aunt at the last said cruelly, to test her, I knew, though it made me start forward, "And what can you bring to the house of Ashfell, girl, but the smell of the stable and a name no one has heard?" Rowena did not color, and did not weep, and said only, "Nothing your ladyship would reckon, ma'am. No fortune, no family, no name. Only that I found him when he was near dead of being alone, and I did not turn from him, and I will not, the whole of my life. Your ladyship can find him a wife with a fortune, and she'll bring the house money. She'll not bring him back from the dark. I've done that already. I reckon it's worth more than a name, though I'll grant you that's for you to weigh, not me." My aunt looked at her a long, long moment, and then, I will remember it to my dying day, the iron in her face cracked, just at the corner of the mouth, into something that in another woman I would have called the beginning of a smile. "He is right," she said to me, not taking her eyes from Rowena. "You have more backbone than the whole of the county's daughters put together, and more sense besides. A duke wants backbone in a house more than he wants blood. I have always said so, and been called wicked for it." She rose and crossed to Rowena, and took the girl's healing hands in her own thin, cold ones, and looked at the marks the long line had left, and said, more gently than I had heard her say anything in 30 years, "You will let me send for a woman to see to these. A duchess's hands are looked at, whatever else is not." And that, the granting of the word duchess, spoken as a settled thing, was Lady Farron's blessing, and it was as near to a prayer as ever passed her lips, and Rowena, who missed nothing, understood it and pressed the old woman's hands, and the two of them looked at one another with the beginning of the long, wry, iron and moorland friendship that was the joy of my aunt's last years, and I do believe mine. We were married in the spring, in the small gray church at the foot of the dale, with the moor coming green above it and the becks loud with snow melt. Josiah Hale wept openly in the front pew and did not care who saw. Pike was scrubbed pink and near strangled in a collar. The lads from the yard stood at the back in their Sunday best and cheered, against all propriety, when I kissed her, and I would not have silenced them for the world. My aunt came in gray, not black. I marked it and marked what it meant, and stood very straight and did not weep, but held my arm hard at the church door after, harder than the leg quite liked, and said, "Lo, your father was a fool, Adrian, and I have thought so for 40 years and never said it till now. He would have made you marry the fortune. He would have died content and left you empty. She is the best thing that has come to this house in my lifetime. Do not, for the love of God, ever be too proud to know it." And then she straightened her bonnet and was iron again, and swept off to terrify the wedding breakfast, and I stood a moment in the spring light quite unable to speak. The gray came to the wedding too, after a fashion. We would not be parted from him. He had earned his place in the story as surely as either of us, and he is turned out now in the home paddock below the gallery windows, where he grows fat and insolent, and lets the stable children ride him, and comes to the wall for apples like the honestest horse in England, and no one who did not know would ever guess he had once been a killer marked for the gun. He looked over the churchyard wall through the whole ceremony as though he meant to have an opinion on the business, and Rowena laughed to see him there, and I laughed too, and the vicar looked pained, and I did not care. Cousin Crail, I am glad to say, will not have the house. We have a son now and a daughter after him, and the son has his mother's level eyes and his mother's way with a nervous pony, and I am told, though I cannot see it myself, something of my own look about the jaw. He does not flinch, my boy, not because he has been taught not to, as I was, but because he has never once been given cause to. His mother saw to that before he could walk. I mean him to grow up soft where it matters and to know that it is the best of him, and not, as I did, to spend 30 years calling it emptiness for shame. That is the one true inheritance I care to leave him. The rest, the name, the acres, the seat in the Lords I take now, plainly, ruined face and all, and no man dares to stare above a moment. The rest is only surface, and I know now what surface is worth. I do not hide my face. I ride out most mornings, slow, on the fell, with Rowena beside me, the two of us, and often the grey loose at our heels like a great foolish dog, and the folk of the Dale, who once doffed their caps to the Duke who never fell as to a marvel in a glass case, now call out to us across the walls and are easy with me, easy as they never were before, because the man they greet is a real one at last, and not a duke made of surface and fear. I am, I think, better loved as a broken man than ever I was as a whole one, and I have puzzled at that, and I believe I understand it now. A marvel in a glass case cannot be loved. It can only be admired, which is a cold and lonely thing, and I mistook it the whole of my life for the warm thing, and never knew the difference until the warm thing came into my yard in a grey gown, and would not turn from the ruin of me. She asked me once in the dark why I had said send for her that day at the gallery rail, why, after 11 months of wanting nothing on this earth, I had wanted that one thing. I told her the truth, which is that I did not know, that some last dry ember had spoken before I could think, that I had wanted for one moment to alter the course of one single thing. And she was quiet a while in the dark, and then she said in her low voice with the whole of the moor in it, "That's how it always is with the frightened ones. They think there's nothing left in them at all, that the bad day's the whole of what they are, and they'll bide in the dark and let themselves be shot sooner than hope. And then one day, for no reason they can name, they take the one step, just the one, toward the thing they're too feared to want. That's all gentling ever is, love. It's not a trick and it's not a gift. It's only staying near enough and asking nothing and not flinching long enough, that the frightened thing can find the courage, in its own time, to take the one step home." She was speaking of the grey, I think, but she was not only speaking of the grey. I was the Duke who never fell, and I fell, and it was the saving of me, for I fell at last into the one place I had spent my whole proud, frightened life too afraid to go, which was the reach of another soul's hand, laid flat and unafraid against the ruined side of my face. She never once turned away from it. Of all the wild and frightened creatures she gentled in her life, and she gentled a great many, and gentles them still, that was the wildest, and the most frightened, and the least fit, by his own account, to be seen. And she gentled it the same as all the rest, not with a trick, and not with pity, but by staying near, and asking nothing, and waiting, without hurry and without fear, in the cold, at the barred door, for the frightened thing to find at last the courage to take the one step home.